guys have probably noticed that I've soured a little bit on Anthropic over the last year or two. There are a bunch of small reasons for it, but the big one is that they broke my hand. No, they didn't do that. What they actually did was put out models and tools that I just was finding less and less useful. Claude Sonnet 4 was a huge drop when it came out, and I was impressed in the moment, but soon after when other models followed, I found myself needing it less and less. But more importantly, when I went back to try it and compare it with GPT-5, I've found the performance to just not be very good at all. I've filmed multiple videos over the last few weeks where I try to compare Claude Code and the official Claude models with other providers, other tools, and more. And my experience doing that has shown that the Anthropic models just haven't been very good. Or have they? Turns out that my experience might not have been a skill issue or even that the models got worse. Rather, it's starting to seem like there's a bug on the Anthropic side. According to the actual Anthropic team, they have found and resolved 2 issues that were affecting quality in some Claude responses. Interesting. There's also a third separate issue where Opus performance was degraded meaningfully for a large amount of time. And also, as I am filming this, there is a massive outage on the Anthropic site. I opened up status.anthropic twice and got 2 entirely different pages because it's all in chaos. Also, the word wrap there, they're not used to having so many things down that their CSS can't handle it. Oh man, what a ride this has been. There is a lot of interesting stuff going on over at Anthropic. The quality that you've been getting as a developer has varied a lot. The impact that this has on us, and more importantly, the ways we can work around it, are all important things that I think we should discuss, which is why we're going to go very deep on what went wrong with Anthropic, why it's been so much worse lately, and what you can do to make sure that your applications, and more importantly, your experience using cool vibe coding tools, is not going to be impacted by the performance issues and overall regressions here. Do you know what's not down right now? Today's sponsor. If you don't have users, you can skip this part, but for those who do, WorkOS is a thing you absolutely need to know about. These guys understand auth, and I don't just mean like the library you use to set it up. I mean all of the implementation details that make your auth platform work for the companies that you're trying to sell your product to. If Microsoft hit you up today to use your product, are you ready to go? Do you have all the integrations and SAML and whatnot that they would need in order to start using your app? Your answer to this question is either no or yes, because we're on WorkOS. These guys get it. The admin portal is one of the coolest things I've seen any auth company ship. Instead of dealing with all the chaos of Okta, SAML, Duo, ADP, and more, you just get a link that you can send to the customer and they can use with their IT team to get auth configured their way. And instead of wasting your developers' time building these individual integrations for all of these different things so you can save a couple $100 a year, WorkOS just handles it for you. Well, sure, that's cool, but why would you do that when you can just pay engineers to do it yourself? I don't know. Why don't you ask OpenAI, Vercel, Cursor, Plaid, Loom, Socket, Perplexity, XAI, Webflow, Carta, SourceGraph, Fal, Replit, Temporal, or any of the other companies in the space that realized WorkOS makes their lives easier. Even Guillermo, who's like the ultimate skeptic over at Vercel, has told me privately and now publicly in their page how much he wishes they had used an auth platform like WorkOS earlier and how much easier life has been since they made the move. I think we could have done even more business if we had used WorkOS earlier. It's been incredibly well received. And even if you're skeptical of Vercel, their number one competitor, Netlify, fully agrees. There are a few things Netlify and Vercel agree on, and I don't think you want to be on the wrong side of that. Check them out today at soidev.link/WorkOS. Okay, so Claude got way dumber. I thought I was going insane saying this publicly, and there have been a lot of people who have been speculating about this for a while now. If you check out the subreddit, you'll see nonstop frustration and chaos. Did Claude just die 5 hours ago? Is Claude down 5 hours ago? Claude is dead 10 days ago. Internal error. It was good while it lasted. Just canceled Claude. There is a lot. The AI nerf is real. We're working on a project called Is It Nerf, where we monitor LLMs in real time. Very interesting. Update on recent performance concerns from Anthropic official on Reddit. I'm sure the comments on this are going to be totally reasonable and not people upset at all. And someone said all the replies were fake and bot complaints. They sounded so smug making that silly claim. Now we won't see the stop complaining that there's no performance degradation game. 8.5 to 9.4. Can I get a refund for the $200 I wasted? My billing cycle literally ended on 9.4. So this is the write-up they posted about the performance issues that people were seeing with Claude. Last week, we opened an incident to investigate degraded quality in some Claude model responses. We found 2 separate issues that we've now resolved. We are continuing to monitor for any ongoing quality issues, including reports of degradation for Claude Opus 3.1. They called this out here, including reports of degradation, because there was a separate Claude Opus incident just before this. So there have been so many incidents that it's genuinely hard to keep track of. I'm going to do my best to break down the two categories and what's going on and what the dates are. So we have degraded intelligence. So that's the model is still responding, but the quality of the responses is worse. And we have actual downtime. Actual downtime is something like right now where we can't sign in to the Claude.ai site at all. When I tried a minute ago, it would hang forever and then you'd get internal server error. And the API was down as well. It seems like their entire infrastructure just kind of choked up. Obviously, we're mostly here for the degraded intelligence part, but I do want to cover the actual downtime part really, really quickly because it is bad that this continues to happen and I want to make sure that we are thinking about it as an industry. Something I mentioned before on the Medu stream that I was guesting on earlier today is that one of the biggest issues with the AI bubble is that reliability of the things we use every day feels like it's going down, not up, which is kind of terrifying. So Claude.ai, the website, has 99.24% uptime. That means there's a nearly 1% chance, like 1 out of 100 times you open Claude.ai, it's just down. Or if you keep it open a lot and you send a message, it just won't go through because the site is crashed or the backend is broken and things like that. And I swear on my life, it feels like half the time I go to Claude.ai, it is down. I, to be fair, don't use it a whole lot because there's a other chat app you might have heard of that I found to be quite a bit more reliable. Obviously, I mean Deep AI. Now, T3 chat, very nice experience. I'm pumped that we built this for $8 a month. You get every single model, as well as significantly better uptime for reasons that we'll talk about in just a little bit, because api.anthropic.com is better uptime-wise than the website. There's a 0.3-ish gap difference there, which means if you're hitting their API, there's a much better chance that your service is up than if you're going to Claude.ai. But there are other ways to improve your uptime as well, which we'll be talking about momentarily. This incident has been going on since 1628 UTC. It went on for over an hour. Let's try and comprehend this for a second. Earlier in the year, I made the migration that a lot of people made fun of us for changing databases too much, but it wasn't really a database change so much as an entire rewrite from the ground up of our backend that happened to hit some really weird edge cases with everything from the data migration strategy to really weird baked-in auth edge cases due to an older version of the auth library that we had used that we've since upgraded from. But since some users had cookies assigned with the old version, it broke random edge cases. There's a lot of little things that caused problems that resulted in T3 chat not being usable for a percentage of our users when we made the migration to Convex the first 2 times. These migration mistakes and errors haunted me constantly for months. Like, I felt so bad about these downtimes, these outages, these mistakes, and the users that had grown to rely on T3 chat as a thing they can go to that always works, and now they can't anymore. That actually deeply upset me. As such, when we had those outages, I took the time to do a whole write-up about everything that went right and wrong, what our plan was, how we're dealing with it. I was really proud of this. We went ham. We have since addressed almost all the things I call out here, and we have made the service way more reliable. We were down for about 8 minutes. Do you see the difference here? T3 chat goes down for 8 minutes. I own all of the details of the outage and give a detailed report on how we're going to address it and what we'll be doing going forward to prevent things like this. Anthropic, a company that just raised $13 billion, identified API consoles in Claude are down. Services will be restored. A fix has been implemented. 15 minutes later, a fix has been implemented. 25 minutes later, a fix has been implemented. Update, we're continuing to monitor. Resolved, the issue's been resolved. According to chat, it's actually still down. It just loads forever. Let's give it a go. Solve 5 advent of code problems in JS. Okay, it appears to be up again. Yeah. That was why I refreshed during the generation, though. My favorite check. Chat's broken. Of course. I'm sorry, I can't help myself. There was a post from an employee at Anthropic claiming that this bug was fixed, that you could refresh or lose connection and go back and the chat would be fine. That was 3 months ago. It was straight up a lie. I refreshed and that chat is now gone forever. I'm on the same URL for that chat. It's gone. It's dead. That's just life when you use a subpar chat application that's built by a company that doesn't actually care about chat or applications. It's consistently down, which is just not good. It means that you can't rely on their tools. And to be clear, this is both site and API have reliability issues, and severe ones at that. It is my understanding, and I am down to be corrected if I'm incorrect here and I get information otherwise, It is my understanding that a significant portion of the implementation of the Claude.ai website was done by a third party that they contracted because they didn't have the front-end experts internally at the time to build it. I do believe they're maintaining it primarily internally now, but I am almost certain that a lot of the Claude.ai website was not built by them, or certainly not by Claude itself, but was built by third-party contractors. And it shows the site is, of the major labs, the site is the most broken. If we were to rank them by the quality of the site, like T3 Chat being our top tier, and my friends over at Deep AI being a really useful floor for us. You're not familiar. They have a dolphin that's supposed to follow your cursor, but they broke that recently and hasn't worked on any of my browsers, on any of my OSs for a few days now. Now the dolphin's in the corner. The reason there's so much space is because it's full of ads. Interesting. So if this is the spectrum of quality, I would honestly say ChatGPT, really close. The combination of the features it has and the reliability. Then I'll admit, and this hurts me, you know how much this hurts me, the Grok site and mobile app are actually quite good overall. Then I would argue there is a significant gap. I will call this the usable bar. The usable bar means anything below this bar, and I'm judging you. Below here, but relatively close, I would say Gemini app. Like the quality and reliability of the experience isn't great at all, but like it works and it generates most of the time. Then I would say there's a pretty significant gap again. We get into Claude.ai, a reasonable gap one last time. And now we have most open source model labs. So in particular, this is DeepSeek, Qwen, etc. Their sites were built to quickly showcase the model, not be a good experience, and they're rough. And then Deep AI is a really fun meme. So if you're using one of these three, I will judge significantly less hard. Using Gemini, I have questions. If you're using Claude, I have concerns. If you're using the DeepSeek website, I am questioning what state agency is paying you. If you're using Deep AI, you're too young to watch my videos. You might be thinking about how can we prevent the API outages, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, because I want to talk about what we're really here for, the degraded intelligence. So what the fuck is going on? First and foremost, a significant number of people were reporting a degradation in performance when Opus 4.1 dropped. Not immediately after it dropped, but relatively soon after, people were noticing the performance wasn't great. If you recall, Opus 4.1 dropped right before GPT-5. It was clear they knew GPT-5 was coming and they wanted to try and snipe out the launch, but it also kind of seems like they rushed the launch a bit for the same reasons. So Opus 4.1 came out on August 5th, 2025. So August 5, timeline, Opus drops. Then August 7th, GPT-5 drops. And if we go look at the Anthropic status page, we will see that the degraded quality report started, according to them, August 25th. What makes this one particularly funny is that they didn't post about it during the outage, during the intelligence getting worse, where they say in their own words, users may have seen lower intelligence, malformed responses, or issues with tool calling in Claude code. Something important I want to call out about this type of language, users may have seen is a very specific choice of wording. Let's say hypothetically that less than 5% of requests were affected. If this was the case, if it was a small number, a thing that doesn't sound too bad, you can bet your ass that that would have been included in the wording here. They absolutely would have said a percentage if the percentage wouldn't have made them look awful. So the usage of that wording implies that it's not 5% of requests, it's certainly not 1% of requests, it's a meaningful percentage. On top of that, may implies that a user may not have seen it, and they wouldn't have if they didn't use Opus 4.1 through Anthropic's API or website during this window. So if you didn't use it during these 3 days, according to Anthropic, you didn't experience it. So even if 100% of requests had this problem, you may not have experienced it. So the language makes it sound less of a big deal than it probably was. This was caused by a rollout of our inference stack, which we have since rolled back for Claude Opus 4.1. While we often make changes intended to improve the efficiency and throughput of our models, our intention is always to retain the same model response quality. This is where things get really interesting. You might remember a video I did a while back about Claude Code pricing. Claude Code just got way more expensive. We check here. I still had a wrist because Anthropic had yet to beat me up. More importantly, this was August 1st, right before Opus 4.1 dropped. So it seems like a lot of things were happening in this early August window. These things include rushing to get in front of GPT-5, There's the reduction of costs for Claude code because the costs were skyrocketing quickly. And then, arguably most importantly, there was an interest in making sure as many GPUs were available as possible for training purposes. There's an interesting problem at Anthropic right now that I have been hearing from a handful of people where there's a bit of an internal fight because they have a certain number of GPUs. Obviously, all GPUs are represented by a box. And in this box, they need to fit GPUs for a couple different things. They need GPUs for the API for Claude. So if you're hitting api.claude.ai, they need an API for that, and they need to have GPUs reserved for that. They need Claude.ai to have GPUs reserved for them, and they need GPUs for research purposes. They have these three different things they need to use their GPUs for, and these are all competing with each other at all times. On August 11th, during the GPT-5 chaos, Sam Altman made this tweet that has been haunting me since then. This is how they are prioritizing compute as they need more compute for GPT-5, higher demand, etc. The first priority is making sure that current paying ChatGPT users get more total usage than they did before GPT-5. If they don't have enough GPUs, they can't serve that level of traffic. So in order for users to get more usage from their subscriptions, they need more GPUs. So all new compute that they're getting will first and foremost be used to improve the experience for ChatGPT users. They will then prioritize API demand for the currently allocated capacity and the commitments that they've made for customers. For a rough sense, we can support about an additional 30% of API growth from where we are today with this capacity. So again, this is with the amount of compute they planned to give for API access. They will continue putting new GPUs in the servers that are used for API as the demand increases up to a certain point, but they will still be prioritizing paid ChatGPT users. Then they will be increasing the quality of the free tier of ChatGPT, and then they'll start prioritizing increased new API demand. So if you're already an OpenAI API customer that has rate limits set, they're going to make sure there's enough GPUs for that after they make sure paying users are good. And then if you're a new user or you want your rate limits higher, you come in fourth here. I actually really appreciate this level of transparency in the reporting of how the company's internally thinking about where each GPU goes. So if you think about each of these like a bucket, you have the API for Claude, you have Claude.ai, you have research purposes, and then also you have like free versus paid tier, if you want to include that as well. We get this new GPU, which is green for no particular reason, definitely AMD's brand colors. New GPU comes in. We look at the places we can put it, and we choose where it goes. If this was with OpenAI, this would be going into this bucket basically every time we can until we are content with the amount of GPUs and the amount of compute that these users have. And occasionally, we'll throw one in the API, and we'll also throw one in research. But when a new GPU comes in, we have this new GPU we just got fresh from NVIDIA, we have to choose which of the buckets we put it in. There's a big difference between how these things get allocated at different companies. And it is my understanding that the allocation for Anthropic looks something like this, where Anthropic's goal is to put as much compute as possible into research so they can keep making the best models, because that's what they want to do. That's how they want to win. They want to make great models, not great products. They really want their models to be exceptional. As such, they do this. So if it turns out Anthropic usage is so high that they actually need this bar to be here in order to meet the needs of people, what can they do? They can do a lot, and believe me, they do a lot. They love doing things like resetting your rate limits when a new model drops. They also love updating the model deployments to be more efficient and faster, but occasionally slightly dumber. They also will sometimes introduce bulk APIs that are cheaper if you do inference at hours that are less common. It's more and more common for these providers to offer bulk APIs where you're discounted by as much as like 75% if you do inference during hours that are off peak, like late at night on a weekend, for example. The reason for that is, unlike the way we use AI, which, to be frank, from our experience, kind of feels pretty simple, there's this big black box somewhere in the cloud. We have the user request that somebody is trying to generate. They send that message to this magic black box in the cloud. It generates a response. The user gets their message back, and then we pay per token that was used. The costs for the AI companies are not per token costs. It's very easy for us to fall for that because if you look at how things are priced and how they're talked about, it kind of feels that way. Like if we go to token costs, this is how much money it costs per phrase or term or however you want to break down what a token is in an input and an output. And it's easy to think of this as how much it costs for them to run it. So if more traffic comes in, they have more money that they can spend to do more responses. But in reality, there's a fixed number of GPUs that they have that can be doing a fixed number of things at a time. If we were to pretend, for example, that Anthropic could run 10 requests at a time with their current GPUs, we'll make it smaller so it's even easier to work with. So let's say Anthropic has 4 GPUs. I'm sure they have a couple more than that, but you get the idea. And then you have a queue of requests for generations that users want to do, in this case, from the API. So this request comes in, and it gets sent to the first available GPU. This next request comes in. There are still more GPUs available, so we throw it at that. This one goes here. This one goes here. Oh no, we're out of GPUs. Where do we send this next request? How do we get this to a GPU? Well, usually what we have to do is wait until one of these is completed. Now it's done. Now the GPU is available. It can go to the available GPU. So when you don't have enough GPUs available for your request load, things start to get bad pretty fast. And you start doing whatever you can to reduce request load and also increase the amount of availability you have in the infra. So if these normally take 25 seconds to respond, and you find a way to knock it down to 15, all of a sudden you have way more availability because you have a fixed number of GPUs. Where things get even more fun is during nighttime or other windows where there aren't as many users, and suddenly you go from having however many requests in the queue, in this case 7 or 6, suddenly you have fewer requests than Anthropic has infra available. So this GPU that they spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on, is sitting there doing nothing. On top of that, there is a fixed cost that exists when a user does hit a GPU. Yeah, they already paid for the GPU, so it's basically free, right? Nope. Electricity costs. Fun thought experiment. I have an RTX 5090. I live in San Francisco. I like doing random LLM stuff on my 5090. If I ran my RTX 5090 at 100% all month, how much money would it cost per month for power? For context, this card is $2,000 to $3,000. So what would you guess the electricity cost is per month for a card that costs $2,000? I was very surprised when I did the math and learned the number. It'd be a bit over $200 per month. That would be $2,400 per year. And my immediate thought was, okay, that's because San Francisco has really, really expensive electricity. What if we put this in a cheaper place in the US? How cheap could we get this? Turns out I was right. Electricity costs are really high in SF. They're about 2x higher than the cheapest places in the country, which still leaves you at $100 per month to run the GPU or $1,200 per year. And this isn't for one of the GPUs that these companies are using. This isn't an H100 or H200 or something like that. This is a gaming GPU for playing video games. And even that is hitting absurd amounts of dollars per month. The H200 takes 700 watts. The 5090 is 575. So that's actually pretty efficient. I'm surprised that the H200 can be that much better. HGX 208 GPU cluster, which is a common box that people will use to do this, up to 5.6 kilowatts. So as you introduce more NVLink connectors and put more GPUs into a given system so that you get multiple GPUs working on the same thing, power goes up not linearly, but slightly worse. So an 8 GPU would be 5.6 kilowatts. So that's 5,600 watts. So multiply all of my numbers by 10. Yes, that cluster would cost $24,000 a year to run with 8 GPUs. So the cost of electricity is really high. From my rough math, if we were to assume my experience with the 5090 carries over to other GPUs, the cost of the GPU is matched by roughly 1 year of electricity usage. So really, really gut napkin math. 50% of cost is GPU. 50% of cost is electricity. But again, the electricity cost is a recurring one. So if you get these GPUs and you keep using them for 3 years, this will shift towards the GPUs being less expensive and the electricity being more expensive. The GPUs are an upfront cost to get started. The electricity is a consistent cost to run them. That said, let's think about traffic patterns. So during the day, if you don't have enough GPUs, that means you have to buy more GPUs, which means that traffic is now inherently more expensive because you have to buy more GPUs to serve it. It's almost twice as expensive. However, if you have more GPUs than you have requests, the cost on that, if you measure within a year, is around 50% because you already paid for the GPUs. They're sitting there. You only have to pay the electricity half for that GPU now. So that obviously results in a discount around 50%. See why they would do that? Mirrors the cost of the electricity. But since the GPU would otherwise be sitting there doing nothing, they don't let it sit there doing nothing. They find ways to discount the infra and find other ways for people to use it so that you can pay them a discount and they don't have to effectively sit with almost an empty home. Like imagine they're landlords every house that sits empty is costing them money. It's not as expensive as if they had a person living there, but it does still cost money to maintain this empty property. If you can stuff somebody into it, even if you take a discount as a result, it's worth doing. That all said, Anthropic just raised $13 billion. So they are now out of excuses. So what are the ways that we have to solve the problem of the queue being too big and Anthropic's infra being too small? Obvious solution one is buy more GPUs. They do have the money now, so that's probably worth doing. But it takes time, and NVIDIA has way more demand than they have stock and supply right now to sell. So that's going to take time for them to ramp up the infra. So option two, limit access. This is things like the really strict rate limits that they put on almost all Anthropic accounts. They give deals to Y Combinator companies, and part of that is increasing the rate limits. And even then, we found ourselves bumping up on rate limits consistently. And when we asked Anthropic for more allocation on Claude Sonnet 4 when it dropped so that we could offer it reliably in T3 chat, their response was, sorry, we can't do that. We'll put you in the queue of people who requested higher allocation. Then they saw me having viral posts about how bad it was. And also, there are a couple people at Anthropic that like me and are working hard to make things work for us. So they gave me an interesting offer. They offered to increase my Sonnet 4 rate limit by decreasing my rate limit for other models. The reason that they would offer this is because each of their deployments has a specific set of models on it. If we have these deployments, they might have these two grouped up to be the deployments that are running Opus 4.1. And they might separately have these other ones that are running something else, like Sonnet 3.5. The reason they do it this way is that these models are so big and have so much data that the VRAM in these GPUs needs to have it loaded. And if it had to unload one model and load in another on each request, the time to first byte would be way higher. It wouldn't be able to start responding until much later, simply because they have to unload whatever's in memory, load up hundreds of gigabytes into memory instead, and then serve the request. And then when the next one comes in for a different model, take out all that data, put in new data, and run the new request. That's unrealistic. So most companies provision their infra relatively rigidly, so each GPU is dedicated for a specific model and a specific purpose. So if Anthropic had a problem where GPUs were over-allocated for old models and under-allocated for new ones, and they want to give more access to the new models like Opus 4 and Sonnet 4, they'll hit people like me up and say, hey, we'll give you the higher rate limit you want on Sonnet 4, only if you let us take it out of the other rate limits. And remember, these rate limits aren't a guarantee. If everybody was hitting even half their rate limit on their current account on Anthropic, the infra would be down entirely. They're counting on the majority of users not being close to it and hoping that the users who are hitting it regularly will be able to be served in a reasonable amount of time. So strategy one, buy more GPUs. Strategy two, limit access. This also would include stuff like the changes they made to the Claude Code subscription, where they were giving effectively unlimited inference, eating the cost and moving along with it. They saw how big the costs were getting and how much of their GPU allocation was being used for a $200 tier that was costing the money, and that it was harder to serve users on things like the API because more and more GPUs were needed for the Claude Code stuff. So they wanted to restrict how aggressively you could use Claude Code in hopes of reserving more of their compute for traditional users. And also, those traditional users probably pay a lot more per token than the Claude Code users do. But now we're at point three, the last thing they can do to improve the reliability problems of their services by getting more allocation, more availability for requests, which is efficiency. If they are able to make things more efficient, so a request can be resolved in 15 seconds instead of 25 seconds, that effectively increases their capacity. And if they find ways to use less memory and less resources and respond to requests faster, every one of those improvements, even like a 1% improvement in response time, enables more capacity because now GPUs get freed up faster. So they're always looking for ways to improve the efficiency. The difference between Anthropic doing this and other labs doing this is that most other labs will announce something alongside it. Like when OpenAI made O3 way more efficient, they knocked the price down by like 80%. When they made GPT-4 more efficient, they put it out as a new model called GPT-4o. When Anthropic makes things more efficient, they just get more margin. They don't really talk about or disclose those types of things. They don't come out and say, hey, we made this faster. They just quietly ride the wave of how much more money they are saving. Because if the cost for them was actually $15 per million tokens out, and they find a way to reduce the cost by 40%, they don't change the price. Because Anthropic never lowers prices. They just don't. They will give small discounts if you agree to spend enough money. They were trying to get us to agree if we spent minimum $20K a month and signed a contract that we would pay them $20K a month for 3 months, that they would give us a 5% discount on that $20K. If we would spend more than that, we wouldn't get a discount on the greater amount. We would only get 5% off for those $20K commitments. And if we go under at any moment, we're screwed. Because if it turns out 1 month we only need a $15K, but we had the $20K contract, we just burned $5,000. We just lit it on fire. So at all times, Anthropic is firing on all three of these. They're doing everything they can to get more GPUs, more compute, more allocation. They're trying to find ways to limit access to reduce how much abuse the platform is getting and how much more availability they can make ready for API use cases and for their research cases. And they're trying to make things more efficient so that they can get more done per second and have more compute available as a result. And now we get into the fun partnerships side. This is the part where we talk about how to solve this problem as a developer. This is on the AWS compute and specifically their AI chips area because they're building their own chips for doing AI stuff faster. At Anthropic, millions of people rely on Claude daily for their work. We're announcing two major advances with AWS. First, a new latency-optimized version of Claude 3.5 Haiku, which runs 60% faster on Trainium 2 via Amazon Bedrock. And second, Project Rainier, a new cluster with hundreds of thousands of Trainium 2 chips delivering hundreds of exaflops, over 5 times the size of our previous cluster. Project Rainier will help us power both our research and our next generation of scaling. For our customers, this means more intelligence, lower prices, and faster speeds. We have not seen any of those results just yet, and this was in the Claude 3.5 Haiku era, but you get the idea. Anthropic models aren't just available on AWS. If we go to OpenRouter, you can take a look at any of the models. We'll just click Sonnet 4, and there are a few different places that it can be hosted. You might be confused because you can't just download the weights for Anthropic models. They're not open weight. Why can it be used elsewhere? They form strategic partnerships with various clouds to allow you to host Anthropic models in that cloud. So if you're already a Google Cloud customer or an AWS customer, and you need the ability to run this model in your own cloud with your own infra, your own billing, your own privacy rules, your own everything, this lets you do it. And the reason Anthropic made these partnerships was a combination of not having enough infra to serve these people, and more importantly, they needed a way to let people use the infra in their cloud as they would like to do. I'd argue this is one of the many strategic decisions Anthropic made that resulted them in being the model collection of choice for Claude for developers and professional use cases, because you could put it in AWS, you could put it in Google Cloud, it worked well with devs, it worked well for code, it handled tool calling really well. All of these things led to Anthropic models being well liked by us as developers and by companies. So we have Google Vertex Global, Google Vertex Europe, and Amazon Bedrock, alongside, of course, the official Anthropic APIs. Interestingly, though, it does seem as though the uptime on Bedrock is currently garbage. I would not have guessed. That is kind of scary to see. But if we look at the uptime for Google Vertex, for example, 99.75%, the global is 99.76%, and if we look at Anthropic, 96.35%, 1/9 of uptime. Do you understand? When you use something like OpenRouter and you don't bring your own keys, it will auto-route you to whatever they're seeing is the most likely to respond at a given time. And the costs for these different providers are the same because Anthropic enforces that the providers they work with charge the same amount as they do. It's part of their policy. So each of these costs the same. Some of them respond way faster, like Google Vertex responds almost 0.6 seconds faster than Anthropic. That's like a 20% reduction in response time to first token, and the throughput is roughly the same. There are moments where Anthropic is slower. There are models where Google Vertex is slower, like we have right now, but it does vary quite a bit. Also, Bedrock's usually quite a bit faster at 90 TPS. I have no idea what's going on with their uptime, though. If you are relying on Anthropic models, in my opinion, you should not be relying on Anthropic's infra. Anthropic has proven time and time again that their infrastructure is not reliable enough for real-world use cases. It is quite frustrating and annoying. If you want to use their models, I would highly recommend using a layer like OpenRouter to make sure your traffic is routed to a place where it will actually get a response. It really sucks to have your error rates on your service suddenly spike to 100% because you happen to be in one of those windows where Anthropic's infra just goes down because they're not very good at building infra. I don't know if they're vibe coding or what, but it regularly goes down, and they have allocation issues where they don't have enough GPUs for the requests coming in. Something like this will make it way easier to avoid that. This is why I love the OpenRouter guys. This is why I work with them so closely. They're not paying me. I'm not paying them. No money is exchanged hands. No equity is exchanged hands. I just fuck with what they're doing. And if you've been asking us for an API for T3 chat, What you're asking for is actually OpenRouter. And if you wonder how they make money, which I can understand why you would, like I mentioned earlier, if I commit enough money to Anthropic, I can get up to a 5% discount. They can get a slightly better discount because they're doing millions of tokens through these things any given second. On a given day, they can do upwards of 110 billion tokens going through Claude Sonnet 4 alone. That is insane. That is unfathomably insane. That means they can get pretty good discounts. And since they get a discount of probably 8 to 10%, that's their margin. You pay normal price, they pay a slight discounted price, they take the profit. That's how they make money. It's a reasonable model. I'm happy with it overall. If you do end up bringing your own keys, so the billing is going through that instead, they take a percentage off instead. They have a 5% fee when you add credit, but more importantly, if you bring your own key, there's a fee of 5% when the same model provider you would normally use would cost on OpenRouter. So you're paying 5% markup on the inference that you're doing if you bring your own key. But the benefit there is you don't have to worry about it going down because it's rotating between the different providers. I find this all hilarious for a handful of reasons. First off, there was all the drama earlier where Anthropic was trying to cut off OpenAI and Windsurf from access to their models. That's particularly funny because if they cut off access, OpenRouter doesn't cut off access, Google doesn't cut off access, AWS doesn't cut off access. They still have access to the models. They just lose access to the official Anthropic provider, which you shouldn't be using anyways. It's almost amusing to me whenever they kick off a customer from their infra because they're just building awareness for OpenRouter and other providers. Like every time they kick a customer off, they just made one other person aware of the fact that there are other places you can use Anthropic models. It's also funny when there are issues like the thing that we were timelining earlier before I got sidetracked by all of this, which is the awful problems with the quality of the models. So let's go back to our timeline. August 25th, Opus quality fail finally confirmed. August 28th, quality fail probably fixed. And then on August 30th, for the first time ever, they finally confirm there was an issue. And to be clear, people have been complaining about issues with the quality of responses in Anthropic models since all the way back on August 5th. In particular, Claude Code users have been reporting degraded quality from their usage of Claude Code. Remember, they were trying to reduce the cost of Claude Code and get more GPUs available for their training and for the Opus drop. So they clearly were doing some weird stuff in order to reduce how much compute was being used for a given request. There were a lot of theories that varied in quality, people saying that they were quantizing the models, they were deprioritizing traffic from Claude Code at certain hours, all of those types of things. But in the end, probably wasn't any of that. Those things may have resulted in the degradation happening, but I do honestly believe them when they say it was never their intent to make the model dumber. I really don't believe any LLM provider would be willing to do that for so many reasons. That all said, the fact that it went unnoticed for so long is pathetic. And no, I'm not talking about the August 25th to the 30th, although it is pathetic that for 3 days, the model provided was worse for the majority of users, and they didn't even acknowledge it until 2 days after they supposedly fixed it. If that's all this story was, I would have been 50-50 on doing the video. But things got way funnier today. We found and resolved 2 issues that were affecting quality in some Claude responses. We're continuing to monitor for any ongoing quality issues. We're grateful to the detailed community reports that have helped us identify and isolate these bugs. This sounds like the issue we just saw, right? I wouldn't blame you for thinking they were the same. But as they say here, last week we opened an incident to investigate degraded quality in some Claude model responses. That incident that they were investigating was because of the separate Opus bug that we just talked about. And when doing this work, they found even more. They found 2 separate issues that are now resolved. They're continuing to monitor for ongoing quality issues. But let's look at the timeline for this. A small percentage, notice they don't say the percentage, but a small percentage of Claude Sonnet 4 requests experienced degraded output quality due to a bug from August 5th to September 4th, with the impact increasing from August 29th to September 4th. A fix has been rolled out and the incident has been resolved. Ready for more funny timelines? August 29th to September 4th is when it got worse. You know what else happened around that time? The supposed fix for Opus. So in their attempts to fix the Opus bug, they introduced a worse bug on top of an existing bug that had not yet been found during this timeline. So in their attempts to fix degraded performance between August 25th and 28th in Opus, they caused another bigger performance issue that they had to go investigate, realized it was an exponentially worse version of a bug that they had found before, and finally supposedly went and fixed it. But one really important part here I want to call out is again overreading their language. A small percentage of Claude Sonnet 4 requests experienced degraded output quality. We could all bicker over what a small percentage is. I hope they mean under 5. Ideally, they'd mean under 1, but they probably mean under 5% for this. A separate bug affected output quality for some Claude, Haiku, and Sonnet 4 requests. Notice they changed from a small percentage to some. They can be sued if they lie, so they aren't lying here. Again, they use whatever language makes it sound as not bad as possible because Anthropic is not interested in transparency. This first issue, since it was a small percentage, they said that. And then this issue, as well as the Opus issue that we discussed earlier, were not small issues. As such, they were not called that. And also here, with the impact increasing from August 29th to September 4th, they don't say how much it increased. And the comma here is also very strategic because a small percentage was August 5th to September 4th, but the impact increased August 29th to September 4th. I know I'm overreading the language, but they're giving us fucking nothing to work with. Just again, for comparison, I got into shit because GPT-5 was not providing the quality of experience I discussed in my video. It seems like since then people have realized, for better or worse, I was right. GPT-5 is a really fucking good model, especially for code stuff. But at this moment, they didn't. The big part of why were weird bugs and outages on the GPT-5 implementation on ChatGPT. Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, comes out and says publicly, GPT-5 will seem smarter starting today. Yesterday, the auto switcher broke and was out of commission for a chunk of the day, and the result was GPT-5 seemed way dumber. Also, we're making some interventions to how the decision boundary works that should help you get the right model more often. You understand the difference here. Talk all the shit you want about OpenAI not being open. They are weirdly transparent. I have never felt like there was some important information OpenAI had that I didn't, that I couldn't get by just asking one of the people I know there, or even just replying to Sam on Twitter. It's a different world of transparency. Yesterday, the auto switcher broke and was out of commission for a chunk of the day. The result was that GPT-5 seemed way dumber. This isn't saying a small or big percentage of users. This is saying for a portion of the day, a meaningful chunk, all users had a worse experience. No lack of clarity here. If you want the exact timelines, I'm pretty sure they put those on the status page, but they aren't hiding much here. They're telling you what broke and the result, which is everything seems dumber. Again, for comparison, the only comms we've gotten from Claude are, we found it resolved 2 issues that affected quality in some Claude responses. We're continuing to monitor. And then in the official status, getting as vague as possible. So if you want to give me shit for overreading where they place the comma in a sentence, you better give them 10 times more shit for not actually disclosing what the fuck is happening. Anthropic wants to maintain their perception as the developer-friendly, business-friendly, and well-aligned agentic model tooling company, building great models, great tools, and inventing the standards that we're going to build all this AI stuff on. They better start acting like it, because they are just so opaque right now for no good reason. There is no benefit to not disclosing this information, except for one. I will give them the negative, because I've experienced it myself. Remember the post I brought up earlier where I talked about T3 chat's downtime? To this day, we still get nonstop shit from random haters saying, why would I use T3 chat? It's down all the time and you never stop changing databases. I'm going to use something more reliable. Something more reliable like the providers that have less than 2 nines of uptime. Something more reliable like a website that just literally couldn't generate responses for hours a few days ago. Just to be harsh on OpenAI as well, they made a big oopsie not long ago. I was trying to edit a message in ChatGPT, and this is what happened when I tried. I clicked the edit button because it didn't send a response for some reason. And when I did, that all disappeared. And I couldn't get it back. I tried refreshing. It gave me this UI, and it had an empty response showing the buttons for the response, but it didn't work. So I tried again with a new thread, and I got thought for 52 seconds, thought for 16 seconds. Nothing. The response just didn't show no matter what I did. And my personal favorite was this, where I had regenerated 3 times. So I had 1, 2, 3 responses here. I hate this UX, that's why we don't have it in T3 chat, but this is where it gets funny. So 2 out of 3, thought for 20 seconds, nothing. I click to the right, 3 out of 3, literally nothing. Left, thought for 20 seconds, nothing. And then 1 out of 3 is so broken, it doesn't even show. So these are 3 separate broken empty states. 1 breaks the UI. 2 says thought and shows nothing. 3 shows nothing but still has the buttons. Absolutely hilarious. What an outage. That all said, OpenAI owned the absolute shit out of it. ChatGPT not displaying responses. I did see something on Twitter about this, but they're not hiding how bad it is. I wouldn't call this a partial outage because it was absolutely not working on ChatGPT, but very clear timeline start to finish, when this started, when this ended. Not too long, and actually that's pretty long. Going from 1:10 a.m. to 2:51 a.m., like 2 hours of responses not showing is kind of pathetic. I will give that to them. This happens with every provider, is the main point I want to make here. Nobody does this perfectly. So you have to own it and be transparent and communicate what went wrong and what's happening in order for this to improve. I actually do have a theory on what happened on this one. Remember earlier when I did the refresh test on Anthropic and it immediately broke the site? That used to happen on ChatGPT. I am now generating Advent code in 5 languages. I just refreshed. It still has to flush and like generate the response token by token because it's replaying the token history, but you can refresh while it's generating and it works pretty well. Pretty cool to see. Definitely haven't seen any other chat app that has that built in. Absolutely not. Never seen that type of behavior before at all. Notice how ours doesn't generate to the point. It flashes in and then generates going forward. We put a lot of work into how we built this. Point being, they now handle this. But in order to handle this, you have to fundamentally change how you're rendering responses in your UI. You can't just change where the data comes from and expect this to work. You have to make meaningful changes to how the data comes in, how it is processed, and how it is rendered. And my guess is they had an AB like feature flag they had put in to start introducing the new resumable stream stuff. And that broke how response is rendered, which got pushed out. Some API change triggered this new feature flag to be hit, and all of a sudden, no responses are showing. I'm almost positive that's what happened there. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. That said, I'm still just guess checking here because they have not been transparent about what went wrong with that beyond the moment it started, the moment it ended. I think someone tweeted about it from them, thankfully, too. Still feels significantly better than what we're getting from Anthropic, which is zero acknowledgement of the problem until it is resolved. There was no notice on the Anthropic website when the outage for these models was occurring. In fact, we were regularly accused of being bots and gaslighting and paid by OpenAI because we noticed the quality of responses was worse. I legitimately had somebody say that I couldn't be trusted when I said that the quality of the model responses was worse because I'm invested in Cursor. What the fuck does that have to do with a single thing here? Cursor is very well off if Anthropic does well. If anything, talking shit on Anthropic is hurting my relationship with Cursor and hurting my own chance of getting different partnerships and success. I'm talking shit here because I think it's important that we know this. So, yeah, here's my issue. I am so disappointed in Anthropic for just not noticing this first off. What a failure. Failing to notice this entirely is so embarrassing that I would never trust them again. And then after noticing it, only noticing one of the bugs, and when fixing it, causing another worse bug for other models. That is absurd to me, genuinely. And then, most importantly, now that it's resolved, not giving us any detail of what went wrong. What component failed? What were you trying to do? What changes were being made that caused this? I can take them at their word that they aren't trying to make the model dumber. They specifically said here, we'd also like to address a concern we've heard in the community. We never intentionally degrade model quality as a result of demand or other factors. I'm going to write a shitpost with you guys. I wanted to take Anthropic's word here, but it's genuinely hard to do so. They have offered no transparency into what caused these outages, and they didn't even acknowledge them until days after they were resolved. If you want us to take you at your word, you need to show us what happened. We cannot trust a company that does not disclose why their product didn't work properly for months at a time. And again, to be clear, I do still believe them. So mistake 1 is having a degradation of intelligence in your models. Mistake 2 is somehow not noticing for days at a time that your model's being dumber. Point 3 is, in your attempts to fix this, making other models even dumber. And then mistake 4, which is not even disclosing this until after the issue is resolved. Genuinely insane that they went through all of this with us, and we think that that's okay. It's really, really funny to me that I did the Anthropic Weird Vibes video and got flamed for it. Like, absolutely flamed for this one. That was our fault. I will be very clear about that. We screwed up with the time we chose to put this out because it was right around the same time GPT-5 stuff happened just because of the chaos of my calendar. And that resulted in a lot of unnecessary controversy that I did not need to put upon myself and my team. Just for reference, a video that people don't like the I was wrong about GPT-5 gets an 87.6% like to dislike. Most videos are in the 95 to 98 range. That tends to be where my videos sit. The Anthropic is Weird Vibes video is my worst ever on the main channel with 68.2% like to dislike. I got flamed hard for this video. where I talked about a lot of the things we're talking about today, the weird prioritizations, the lack of transparency, the holier-than-thou attitude Anthropic has, the prioritization of themselves internally over their services externally. Once again, I stand behind every single fucking word I said in that video. I understand the publication time was bad. I absolutely will take the L there because unlike Anthropic, I'll actually own the things that I did incorrectly and be transparent about the timelines and reasons that those things happened. I screwed up by putting this out because I was on vacation, it was in the queue, and we just posted it without thinking twice. That was a mistake, and unlike Anthropic, I'll own it. Anthropic will tell you something was up, but they won't tell you what. So hopefully in the future, or hopefully in this video even, we won't have so many people hit the dislike button because finally the rest of y'all are starting to see what I have been seeing for a long time now. Anthropic has weird fucking vibes. They prioritize their ego and their research over putting out something that actually works for humans. They act strange, they do stupid stuff all of the time, and I'm still leaving the door open for us to make amends here. For a while now, I've had Anthropic people offering for me to go to the office and have a sit down with various teams and talk about these things. I do have every intention of taking them up on that, but I would politely request that before that happens, Anthropic take transparency more seriously. I don't like that I have to go to the Anthropic office, sign a bunch of NDAs, have them be honest with me, go back and forth to figure out how much I can and cannot say, and then finally start giving them free brand reputation help, unless there's a commitment to transparency here. I need them to come out and explain what went wrong here, why it wasn't disclosed earlier, and how they will prevent it going forward if we're going to take them at their word. Because right now, it is very hard to trust Anthropic when they say things. That's all I have to say about the utter chaos that Anthropic has been putting all of their users through. If you want something more reliable, you should check out T3 Chat. That's all I got on this one. Hopefully they don't break my other arm. Let me know what you guys think. Until next time, peace, nerds.